The night of the 17th of June, 2001, Sofia, Bulgaria. A 64-year-old man in a suit watches the results come in. The national movement. Simeon II has taken 1,952,513 votes, 120 seats out of 240, an outright near majority built from nothing in 11 weeks. The man at the centre of it is named Simeon Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. 55 years earlier, when he was 9 years old, this country put him on a train and told him never to come back. His uncle had been shot. His father's grave had been dug up. His family's name had been stripped from every public building, every school curriculum, every official record. The Bulgarian state spent half a century making sure no one alive would remember what a Tsar was. And now the same country has just handed him the government. He is the only deposed European monarch in modern history to return to power through a democratic election. He did not inherit it. He did not seize it. He stood for office under his own name, and the country that abolished his throne voted for him by a margin that no Bulgarian political party had achieved since the fall of communism. On the 24th of July, he will be sworn in as Prime Minister. He will govern for 4 years. He will take Bulgaria into NATO. He will open the door to the European Union, and then the country will vote him out the way democracies do. But none of that has happened yet. On this night, there is only the number on the screen and the 55 years behind it. How a 6-year-old boy became Tsar the afternoon his father died. How a 9-year-old boarded a train with his mother and sister and crossed the border with nothing signed and nothing agreed. How a teenager in Madrid claimed a throne that no longer existed. How a businessman who spoke 7 languages and ran a French electronics subsidiary spent half a century waiting for a country that had erased him. And how, when he finally came back, 1 million people lined the streets and wept. This is how all of that happened. Simeon Borisov Saxe-Coburg-Gotha was born on the 16th of June 1937 at Vrana Palace on the outskirts of Sofia. Church bells rang across the capital. 101 cannon salvos were fired, students were granted extra marks on their exams, convicts received amnesty. His father, Tsar Boris III, and we sent an Air Force officer to the Jordan River to collect water for the infants' Orthodox baptism. Boris III had ruled Bulgaria since 1918, when his own father, Ferdinand I, abdicated after the catastrophe of the First World War. He was not the kind of monarch who lived behind walls. He drove without bodyguards. He talked to farmers in the fields outside Sofia. On a state visit to England in 1937, he climbed into the cab of a Great Western Railway locomotive and took the throttle himself, delighting the crew and alarming his security detail. His wife, Queen Giovanna, was born Giovanna of Savoy on the 13th of November 1907 at the Quirinale Palace in Rome, the daughter of King Victor Emmanuel III of Italy and Queen Elena of Montenegro. They married on the 25th of October, 1930 at the Basilica of St. Francis of Assisi. Mussolini himself registered the union. Their first child, Princess Maria Luisa, was born on the 13th of January 1933. Simeon arrived 4 years later. Bulgaria's position during the Second World War was a balancing act that required extraordinary nerve. The country signed the Tripartite Pact and joined the Axis on the 1st of March 1941. It declared war on Britain and America on the 13th of December that year. But Boris refused to declare war on the Soviet Union. He refused to send Bulgarian troops to the Eastern Front. And when the Nazis demanded the deportation of Bulgaria's Jews, he refused that too. The mechanism of refusal was precise. In February 1943, MOL SS officer Theodor Danica and Bulgarian Commissar Alexander Belev signed a secret agreement to deport 20,000 Jews. Trains were scheduled, transit camps were prepared, Then the Deputy Speaker of Parliament, Dimitar Pishev, learned of the plan and organised a protest letter signed by 43 members of the National Assembly. Archbishop Stefan of Sofia hid Jews in his home and issued false baptismal certificates. The deportation order for Jews within Bulgaria's pre-war borders was halted. It was halted from what contemporaries called the highest place: Boris himself. Approximately 48,000 Bulgarian Jews survived the war. 11,343 Jews from Bulgarian-occupied Thrace and Macedonia were not saved. They were handed to the Germans and transported to Treblinka, till nearly all of them died. On the 9th of August 1943, Hitler summoned Boris to an urgent meeting at the Wolf's Lair in Rastenburg, East Prussia. Boris arrived on the 14th, flown in by Hitler's personal pilot. The negotiations were long and the atmosphere was hostile. When aides left the two leaders alone over lunch, they emerged, according to witnesses, tremendously upset, tense and angry. Hitler wanted two things: the deportation of Bulgarian Jews to the death camps and a declaration of war on the Soviet Union. Boris refused both. He cited the pro-Russian sentiment of the Bulgarian population and the uncertain position of Turkey on the southern border. His sister later recorded what he said when he returned: "I saved you, even if I have to pay for it." 9 days later, on the 23rd of August, Boris was working at the palace when at 7:30 in the evening he was seized by violent spasms and vomiting. Over the following 5 days, his condition worsened. High fever, a rash spreading across his body, convulsions, signs of liver failure. A brief improvement on the 27th gave false hope. On the 28th of August, 1943, at 4:22 in the afternoon, Tsar Boris III died in the royal palace in Sofia. He was 49 years old. The official cause was listed as coronary thrombosis. The German military attaché, Colonel von Schönebeck, recorded in his diary that 2 German physicians, including the toxicologist Hans Eppinger, believed Boris had died from the same slow-acting poison Eppinger had identified during the autopsy of the Greek Prime Minister Metaxas. Joseph Goebbels wrote in his diary on the 10th of September, "The Führer told me that it must now be regarded as certain that he was killed by snake poison." Hitler suspected the Italian royals. Princess Maria Luisa believed the Soviets were responsible. Others pointed to the Nazis themselves. A 1991 re-examination of the preserved heart proved inconclusive. No definitive answer has ever been established. The Bulgarian cabinet declared 40 days of mourning. Streets across Sofia filled with weeping crowds. Boris was buried at Rila Monastery in the mountains south of the capital. On the day his father died, 6-year-old Simeon became Tsar Simeon II under Article 34 of the Tarnovo Constitution. A 3-man regency council was appointed to govern on his behalf. His uncle, Prince Kirill of Preslav, and who was Boris's younger brother, Professor Bogdan Filov, the sitting prime minister and a known Nazi sympathizer, and Lieutenant General Nikola Mihov, the former Minister of War. They were to serve until Simeon reached the age of 18. They would serve for barely a year. On the 5th of September 1944, the Soviet Union declared war on Bulgaria. Soviet troops crossed the Danube 3 days later. On the 9th of September, a Soviet-backed coalition called the Fatherland Front, communists, left-wing agrarians and sympathetic military officers, seized power in a coup d'etat. Prince Kirill and the other 2 regents were arrested. New communist-aligned regents were installed in their place: the Marxist philosopher Todor Pavlov, the jurist Venelin Ganev, and the politician Tsvetko Boboshevsky. What followed was systematic. The People's Court, established in late 1944, conducted 135 mass trials between December 1944 and April 1945. 11,122 people were formally accused. 2,730 were sentenced to death. On the night of the 1st of February 1945, following a verdict read before a rally of 150,000 people in central Sofia, the regime carried out its largest single execution. Prince Kirill was shot first, then Professor Filov, then General Mihov, then 22 former cabinet ministers, then 67 members of parliament, then 47 generals and senior military officers. When the cardiologist Professor Alexander Stanishev asked to verify that the victims were dead so that none would be buried alive, the executioners shot him in the back of the head. The bodies were dumped in a bomb crater at Sofia Central Cemetery and covered with cinders. Beyond these formal proceedings, between 20,000 and 30,000 people were killed extrajudicially by partisan gangs in the first months after the coup. Simeon was 7 years old. He and his mother and his sister remained at Vrana Palace under what amounted to house arrest. Soviet soldiers stationed on the grounds entertained themselves by firing rifles in the direction of Queen Giovanna as she walked with her children. In April 1946, the communist authorities exhumed the body of Boris III from Rila Monastery and transported it by truck to Vrana, forcing the Queen and the children to witness the nighttime reburial in the palace grounds. 8 years later, in 1954, the small chapel Giovanna had built over the grave was blown up on orders from Communist General Secretary Valko Chervenkov. The remains vanished. Only the Tsar's heart, preserved separately by a physician, survived. It was recovered decades later and reburied at Rila Monastery in 1993. On the 8th of September 1946, a referendum on abolishing the monarchy was held under Soviet military occupation. Note the official result: 3,833,183 votes for a republic, 95.6%, against 175,234 for retaining the monarchy. Turnout was reported at 92%. Armed guards monitored polling stations. Western diplomats documented ballot stuffing, plural voting, and systematic intimidation of voters. Opposition figures privately estimated actual support for the Republic at closer to 50%. The referendum violated Bulgaria's own Tarnovo constitution, which required a Grand National Assembly, convened by the Tsar, to change the form of government. On the 15th of September, the People's Republic of Bulgaria was formally proclaimed. The next day, the 16th of September, 1946, the royal family was given hours to leave. At 4 in the afternoon, Queen Giovanna, 9-year-old Simeon and 13-year-old Maria Luisa departed Vrana Palace. They boarded a special train at Kazychene station at 4:48 in the afternoon, reaching the border station at Svilengrad around 11 at night. Only Regent Venelin Ganev came to see them off. He whispered to the Queen, "Be thankful that they did not kill you." And then, "A lot of wrong things happened in our country, but please forgive me." When a photographer asked for a picture, Giovanna turned her back. "It's not common to take pictures of a departure," she said. "It happens on arrival." Simeon never signed any abdication papers. He was 9 years old. No such document would have had legal validity. The train crossed into Turkey and continued to Istanbul. Behind them, the new republic began the process of erasure. The December 1947 nationalization law confiscated all royal property without compensation. Vrana Palace and its park of 282 acres, Tsarska Bystritsa Palace in the mountains near Borovets, Krichim Palace, the Royal Palace in central Sofia, which was converted into the National Art Gallery, Yuksinograd Palace on the Black Sea coast, hunting lodges, forest land totaling approximately 7,000 hectares, bank accounts, securities. Vrana's collection of 282 paintings was sorted. Some went to government offices, some to state galleries, and those with what the regime called monarchical content were destroyed. The grand reception hall became a cinema, and a portrait of Georgy Dimitrov replaced the royal crest on the wall. From Istanbul, the family travelled by ship to Alexandria, Egypt, where Giovanna's father, the exiled King Victor Emmanuel III of Italy, was living in diminished circumstances. Victor Emmanuel died there on the 28th of December 1947 at the age of 78. Young Simeon enrolled at Victoria College in Alexandria, a British-run school whose student body included the future King Hussein I of Jordan and Crown Prince Leka of Albania, 3 boys from 3 abolished thrones sitting in the same classrooms. In 1950, a plot to murder Simeon was discovered in Egypt, the details of which prompted Giovanna to seek a safer country. Through the Spanish ambassador in Cairo, Generalissimo Francisco Franco granted the family asylum. And they arrived in Barcelona on the 20th of July 1951. Simeon was 14. The family settled in Madrid, eventually taking up residence on Avenida del Valle, number 3, near the Moncloa district. The house became known among Bulgarian émigrés as Palace Madrid. It was not a palace. It was the home of a widowed queen without income, raising 2 children in a foreign country with the help of a dwindling circle of loyalists. Giovanna organised annual charity auctions. She ran an unofficial Red Cross service for scattered Bulgarians. She maintained on no budget and with no diplomatic recognition the structure of a court in exile. She once said, "I am a queen and my shield is the Bulgarian people." Simeon attended the Lycée Français de Madrid. On the 16th of June, 1955, since his 18th birthday, he issued a formal proclamation to the Bulgarian people, asserting his constitutional right to the throne under the Tarnovo constitution. Franco awarded him the Grand Cross of the Order of Carlos III, was Spain's highest royal honour. Between 1958 and 1959, Simeon attended Valley Forge Military Academy in Pennsylvania, enrolled under the name Cadet Rilski, number 6883. The recommendation came from George Earle, the former American envoy to Boris III. He graduated as a second lieutenant. He returned to Madrid and studied law and business administration. His closest friendship among the exiled royals of Europe was with Juan Carlos, who would eventually become King of Spain. And they had grown up in the same overlapping aristocratic circles in Madrid, and the connection deepened when Simeon married into a family already linked to the Spanish royal house. On the 21st of January 1962, Simeon married Doña Margarita Gómez Acebo y Cejuela, born on the 6th of January 1935. Her parents, the 4th Marquess of Cortina and his wife, had been executed by Republican forces during the Spanish Civil War, when Margarita was barely a year old. The wedding required 3 ceremonies. A civil ceremony at Lausanne Town Hall on the 20th of January, an Orthodox ceremony at the Russian Orthodox Church of St. Barbara in Vevey, Switzerland on the 21st, and a private audience with Pope John XXIII to resolve Vatican concerns about the Orthodox Catholic Union. Margarita wore the Bulgarian fleur-de-lis tiara, made by the Viennese jeweller Kuchert in 1893. Among the guests were ex-King Farouk of Egypt and members of the Greek, Romanian and Yugoslav royal families. Margarita's cousin, Luis Gómez Acebo, later married Infanta Pilar of Spain, the elder sister of Juan Carlos, cementing a direct family link between the Bulgarian and Spanish royal houses. They had 5 children, all born in Madrid, all given names drawn from medieval Bulgarian history. Prince Kardam, born on the 2nd of December 1962. Prince Kirill, born on the 11th of July 1964, who would graduate from Princeton with a degree in physics. Prince Kubrat, born on the 5th of November 1965, who trained as a surgeon. Prince Konstantin Asen, born on the 5th of December 1967, who would earn an MBA from Columbia University and become a Barclays country manager. And Princess Kalina, born on the 19th of January 1972, who specialized in art history and later married the Spanish explorer Quintín Muñoz. For 13 years, Simeon served as chairman of the Spanish subsidiary of Thomson, the French defence and electronics conglomerate. He worked as an advisor in banking, hotels and catering. He spoke Bulgarian, Spanish, English, French, German, Italian and Portuguese. He maintained a chancellery in Madrid, a small office with a part-time staff, that issued political declarations and coordinated aid for Bulgarian émigrés, though his attempt to establish a formal government in exile never materialised. When he and Margarita raised their 5 children between the Lycée Français and Sunday Orthodox liturgies at the Bulgarian church in Madrid, they spoke Bulgarian at home. The children learned Spanish in the streets and French at school. Simeon took the boys hiking in the Sierra de Guadarrama. He told them about Vrana the way other fathers told bedtime stories. The gardens, the greenhouse, the view of Vitosha from the terrace. Every year on the 16th of June, he marked his birthday with a reception for Bulgarians in Spain. Old men who had served in Boris III's army attended in soats they had owned since the 1940s. Every year, Simeon issued a statement to a country that didn't acknowledge he existed. No Bulgarian government replied. No Bulgarian newspaper printed it. For 50 years, the ritual didn't change. The Berlin Wall fell in November 1989. Bulgaria's communist regime collapsed the same month. In 1990, Simeon received a new Bulgarian passport. He did not visit immediately. The new democratic governments were uncertain about what his return might mean, and the legal status of the monarchy, abolished by a referendum widely regarded as fraudulent, remained unresolved. 6 years passed. On the 25th of May 1996, Simeon landed in Sofia. He flew on King Juan Carlos's personal plane. 3,000 people waited at the airport with flowers and the old royal tricolour. Along the 9-kilometre route from the airport to the city centre, crowds estimated at between 500,000 and 1 million people lined the streets. The drive took 2.5 hours. Church bells rang across Sofia. Many even-known former communists were seen waving royal flags. The mayor of Sofia greeted him with the traditional bread and salt. The archbishop said, "Your Majesty, welcome to your capital." Simeon was so overcome he could barely speak. He managed, "I love you." At Alexander Nevsky Cathedral, he wept. The last time he had heard those bells, they tolled for his father's funeral. At the Eagle Bridge, when a security guard roughly shoved an elderly man trying to approach the car, Simeon leapt out. "Don't ever treat Bulgarians like that in my presence." The story travelled across Sofia within hours. At Rila Monastery, where Boris III's heart had been reburied 3 years earlier, the abbot broke down describing how the communists had desecrated the grave and expelled the monks. Hence, the socialist government received him as a private citizen and nothing more. State media were instructed to refer to him as Citizen Simeon Coburg. Russian television, which could be received in Bulgaria, used the phrase His Majesty Tsar Simeon. One Bulgarian journalist observed, "The Russians don't back losers." But the emotional reunion did not produce a legal one. Simeon visited Vrana Palace and found the estate in disrepair. The grounds overgrown, the interiors stripped, the cinema screens still hanging in the reception hall. The courts rejected his initial property claims. The palaces remained state property. The forests remained nationalised. The government that wept when he arrived had no intention of returning what had been taken. Simeon returned to Madrid. He came back to Bulgaria again and again over the following years, visiting monasteries, meeting with politicians, attending Orthodox services. But the country offered him warmth without restitution, affection without legal recognition. And on the 26th of February 2000, Queen Giovanna died in Estoril, Portugal, at the age of 92. She had held the family together across 5 decades of exile, across 7 countries, through poverty and assassination plots, and the systematic destruction of every physical trace of her husband's memory. She did not live to see what her son did next. On the 6th of April, 2001, 11 weeks before the parliamentary elections, Simeon made a televised address from Sofia. Bulgaria in 2001 was a country that had not yet found its footing. After the banking crisis of 1996 and 97 had wiped out the savings across the country. Unemployment stood at roughly 18%. An estimated 70% of the population lived at or below the poverty line. No post-communist government had ever been re-elected. The population had cycled through socialists, democrats and technocrats and found each one inadequate. Into this vacuum, Simeon announced the founding of the national movement Simeon II. He spoke in careful, accented Bulgarian, his first language, but one he had not used publicly in decades. He said it was painful to see how the dream in Bulgaria had been replaced by poverty and desperation, and that it was neither morally nor politically acceptable that Bulgarians were living in misery while some politicians lived in opulence. When he made one promise that would define everything that followed: "I am ready to propose a plan of economic measures with the help of which the famed Bulgarian industriousness and enterprise will change your lives in no more than 800 days." He also made one thing explicit: it must be clear to all that monarchy is not on the movement's agenda. When Sofia City Court initially blocked the movement's registration as a political party, it allied with two minor existing parties to gain access to the ballot. The campaign lasted 72 days. On the 17th of June 2001, the national movement Simeon II took 42.74% of the vote and 120 seats. The incumbent Union of Democratic Forces collapsed from 137 seats to 51. Simeon formed a coalition with the Movement for Rights and Freedoms, which held 21 seats, giving the government 141 seats in the 240-seat National Assembly. On the 24th of July 2001, Simeon Saxe-Coburg-Gotha was sworn in as Prime Minister of the Republic of Bulgaria. "With strong feelings, but with my typical sense of duty, I accept the proposal," he said. "May God be with us and show us the right path." His cabinet was unlike anything Bulgaria had seen. It was filled with Western-educated technocrats, not career politicians, not former communists, not provincial party bosses. The finance minister, Milan Velchev, held degrees from the London School of Economics. The foreign minister, Solomon Passy, was a mathematician who had founded the Atlantic Club of Bulgaria. The chief EU negotiator, Meglena Kuneva, would later become Bulgaria's European Commissioner. At a NATO foreign ministers' meeting, Simeon answered each representative's questions in their own language. The room noticed. The government's record on foreign policy and institutional integration was substantial. Bulgaria was invited to join NATO at the Prague summit in November 2002. On the 29th of March 2004, it formally became a full NATO member. Simeon personally handed the ratification documents to United States Secretary of State Colin Powell. The government closed all 30 chapters of EU accession negotiations. Bulgaria signed the EU accession treaty on the 25th of April 2005, with full membership set for the 1st of January 2007. GDP growth accelerated from 4.9% in 2002 to approximately 6% by 2005. State debt fell from 67.3% of GDP to 22.8%. The government was the first in post-communist Bulgarian history to complete its full 4-year term. It survived 6 votes of no confidence. If this story is worth remembering, a like helps more people find it. The 800-day promise consumed everything else. Government approval, which started above 70%, fell to 9% by March of 2003. Unemployment remained stubbornly high. Wages did not rise at the pace the promise implied. And the flat tax rate of 10%, among the lowest in Europe, attracted foreign investment, but did not produce the visible improvement in daily life that voters had expected within the stated timeframe. Controversial privatization deals, including the attempted sale of the state tobacco monopoly Bulgartabak to British American Tobacco, eroded public trust. Internal discipline collapsed. 11 members of parliament from the national movement defected in March 2004, forming a splinter group. Simeon, in an interview, said that Bulgarians had the wrong chip in their heads. It was the kind of sentence that compresses an entire political failure into 6 words. He meant that the population expected the state to solve problems that required individual initiative. And what the population heard was contempt from a man who had lived in Madrid for 50 years and returned to lecture them about enterprise. On the 25th of June, 2005, the national movement Simeon II fell from 120 seats to 53, taking 19.88% of the vote. The Bulgarian Socialist Party won 82 seats and formed a tripartite coalition with the National Movement and the Movement for Rights and Freedoms, under the new Prime Minister Sergei Stanishev. Simeon served as the ceremonial chairman of the Coalition Council, a position with a title and no power. In July 2009, the party took 3.01% of the vote, below the 4% threshold for parliamentary representation, and won 0 seats. On the 6th of July, in 2009, Simeon resigned as party leader. He was 72 years old. His political career was over. It was not the only loss of those years. On the 15th of August 2008, his eldest son, Prince Kardam, was involved in a catastrophic car accident on a highway near Madrid. He suffered severe brain injuries and entered a coma from which he never fully emerged. For nearly 7 years, Kardam existed in a state between life and death, moved between clinics in Madrid, Germany, and eventually Sofia. On the 7th of April 2015, he died in a hospital in Madrid. He was 52 years old. He left behind his wife, Miriam Hungria, and 2 sons, Boris and Beltran, who had been 15 and 13 when the accident happened. The property battles spanned decades. Then, after the Bulgarian Constitutional Court unanimously declared the 1947 confiscation law unconstitutional in 1998, Simeon pursued restitution through the domestic courts. The results arrived slowly and unevenly. Tsarska Bystrica Palace in the mountains near Borovets was ruled his property by a court in October 2020. Vrana Palace, the estate where Simeon had been born, had lived as a child Tsar, had been exiled from, and to which he had returned, endured the longest legal battle. A lower court ruled against him in 2018. The Court of Appeals reversed the decision in July 2021. And on the 12th of December 2022, the Supreme Court of Cassation issued a final, unappealable ruling confirming Simeon and his sister Maria Luisa as the lawful owners of the Vrana estate. Krychim Palace was ruled state property. The Saragiol and Sitnyakovo estates were lost. At the European Court of Human Rights, the case of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha and Krobok versus Bulgaria produced a ruling on the 7th of September 2021, finding that Bulgaria had violated Simeon's property rights through a disproportionate moratorium on the use of approximately 7,000 hectares of forest land that had been restituted to the family. In May 2023, the court awarded €1,635,875 in damages. In May 2015, the Bulgarian Orthodox Patriarchate formally announced that Simeon would be referred to as Tsar of Bulgaria in all church services. His autobiography, published by Flammarion in 2014 under the French title Un destin singulier, was presented at UNESCO headquarters in Paris. In May 2023, he attended the coronation of King Charles III in London. In January 2025, Romania awarded him the Grand Cross of the National Order of the Star of Romania. His daughter, Princess Kalina, married the Spanish explorer Kitin Munoz in 2002 at Zarska Bistrica, the first royal event held at a Bulgarian palace since 1946. Their son, Simeon Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, was born on the 14th of March 2007 in Sofia, when he was the first member of the Bulgarian royal family born in the country in 70 years. His godfather is King Mohammed VI of Morocco. Simeon has 5 children and 11 grandchildren. His second son, Kyril, a Princeton physics graduate, worked at Lehman Brothers and GLG Partners in London. His third son, Kubrat, trained as a surgeon. His fourth son, Konstantin Asen, ran Barclays' Madrid office and is godfather to Infanta Sofia of Spain, the younger daughter of King Felipe VI. The family spans Bulgaria, Spain and Britain. They carry Bulgarian, Spanish and in some cases, dual passports. The names they give their children, Boris, Mafalda, Olympia, Tirso, Simeon, Hassan, reach back across centuries and forward into a generation that has no memory of what was lost. The night of the 17th of June 2001 happened because a country that had abolished its monarchy, shot its regent, dynamited its king's grave, and spent 50 years erasing the family's name, looked at the man who carried that name and handed him the government anyway. He didn't restore the throne. He didn't seek revenge against the descendants of the people who killed his uncle or exhumed his father. He joined NATO. He opened the door to Europe. He made a promise he could not keep, and the country held him to it. Vrana Palace sits on the eastern edge of Sofia, surrounded by a park of 282 acres. It was built by Tsar Ferdinand I beginning in 1901, expanded by Boris III, confiscated by the communists in 1947, used as a state residence for decades and returned by court order in 2022. The man who lives there now was born in that house in 1937. He left it at the age of 9. He came back at the age of 85 as its legal owner, confirmed by the highest court in the country that once expelled him. He is 88 years old. He has been a Tsar, an exile, a cadet, a businessman, a prime minister, a defendant in his own country's courts, and a private citizen. 101 cannon were fired the day he was born. Nobody fires them now.